is Windi. My two boys are Brian and Cameron. And coming to just share my story, my gospel story of one of the ways God worked mightily in my own life. God works and plans for His own people and His own purpose in His due time. And the way that happened for me is Windi and I met in 1990, and in 1991 we decided to get married. And one of the things that she was adamant about with me is that she wanted to adopt, to start her family. Well, I think that was supposed to blow me out of the water and say, that's not going to work. But that was actually okay with me. So we got married, and a few years later, we were going to start our family and went through adoption process. One of the things that was also a factor in that is that while I was taking the program called Perspectives on the Christian World Movement to basically hone my skills as a better Christian and also to do better outreach for missions, I was going to take the Perspectives class. The class was for 16 weeks long. You could take it either for college credit if you wanted to, or just audit. And when I was taking that class, I was also signed up for Peace Corps. I was right in the middle of processing that. That took about 9 months to a year to get accepted. And I was actually accepted to leave and go do service in Peace Corps in Honduras, and going to go down and be a business agricultural consultant for a couple of years. So I had a choice to make. I had a choice to make: either go with what I had discovered and found through Windi, or leave and go and do Peace Corps service, which I'd already worked so hard to get into to begin with. So it was tough. Tough choice, tough decision, but the answer is obvious for those of you that know us. I chose to go with Windi, and we got married, and then that's when all of the perspective stuff came into play, and has been a part of our lives still through missions all along, even to today. And prior to, or one of the things that would have given me a clue about Windi's being serious about adoption is over in Chambly, there were at the time a large population of Cambodian refugees. Well, she had made friends with, seemed like, every Cambodian kid that was over there, and first time I went to church, I went down and found Windi, and of course the first thing before I found Windi, I found the kids. And the oldest Cambodian young lady that was in there, she was probably 12, I came up and just asked her, "Where is Windi Massey?" And she got all up in a tizzy and said, "What do you want with Windi?" And here this 12-year-old kid was getting ready to take me out, for sure, wondering why I was here to see Windi. And so adoption, again, none of these kids were in the category of adoption, but it was just showed where Windi's heart was for missions, and to take hold or seize the moment for what was in her own backyard in Chambly and all of the Cambodian kids. Well, as it turned out, the Cambodian kids all wound up, in some form or fashion, wound up being part of our wedding. And so that worked out. They didn't kill me for trying to marry Windi and take her away. They still wound up being part of our family, so to speak, all the way up until we adopted Brian. So after we were married and the Cambodian kids and all still were around, but not quite as much, we started talking about adoption again, and Windi kind of jides me and says, she came up to me and tried probably a dozen different times in a dozen different ways to ask me the same question, do you really want to adopt? And every time I would give her the same answer. I wanted to adopt too. So the adoption process, that took about a year. We were fortunate in the fact that we found a lady who herself had adopted, and she started her own company to help people go through adoption, to be prepared for the adoption process. And that was absolutely phenomenal, because we had not applied for, but had considered all different things, everything from local adoption to India to you name it. We had gone through all the different qualifications that were required for people to adopt internationally. Adopting locally, so to speak, at the time was very, very tenuous, because it seemed like it was nothing. There was constantly stuff in the news about families or birth moms changing their mind even after supposedly everything was done legally and proper, and the child now at 3 years old is being taken away from the adoptive parents. So therefore that was a big decision maker for us to say we need to adopt internationally, so these kinds of hiccups don't wind up haunting us, and saying that something wasn't done properly. Time frame wise, the adoption itself, going through all of the home studies and things that were required of us legality wise, and we were being guided with this lady who had been through the adoption process herself and was extremely helpful, making it a smooth transition to the adoption. Took about a year, and we did home studies, and people would come out to see where we lived and how much money we made and what the neighborhood was like, in this case Lilburn/Stone Mountain area. And eventually on February 10th, 1995, Brian came home to us, and originally the adoption people said, okay, where would you be able to pick up Brian? What are the two closest airports? Well, we thought we would at least have to go to California, possibly even Korea, to pick him up. But no, it was the option of what are the two closest airports, which were Birmingham and Atlanta. As it turned out, there was a stewardess who made it her ministry, so to speak, to bring over adopted children from Korea, because she was an airline stewardess and would frequent Korea, and she brought Brian all the way to Atlanta. And again, that was February 10th, 1995, and it actually snowed that day. And of course, when he got off the plane, he was the last one to get off, and then the stewardess brought him out with the last of the passengers coming off of the plane. Now here's the key part to this. After the adoption and after Brian came home to us, that was nice enough. That was, been long, lots and lots of work, finally coming to fruition. But at some point, I'd say just a few weeks later, I saw and had Windi holding Brian, and Brian, by the way, came home to us when he was only 5.5 months old. And Windi was holding Brian. Actually, we were in my dad's boat out over on close to around Lake Lanier, and I looked at Brian, and then all of a sudden I realized that I had dreams many countless times with Brian being in the dream. This is one of God's ways of communicating to me what to expect. Now, the other key thing about that is I'm kind of a slow learner. It takes me a long time to warm up to stuff. So God knew that long before I ever even considered adoption, and that's where Brian came from. He was in the dreams, in my dreams, countless number of times. He was there, and just whatever the dream was going on, he would be a part of it. And in that dream, or in those dreams, when I first saw Windi holding Brian, it was like a tidal wave flooding me over. I mean, it's just like, this, here it is. This is reality, the apex of what was going on, not just the fact that Brian was with us, but that he'd been with me in my dreams, communicated through God, through his intervention of dreams, vision and dreams, if you will. And it stuck. It was there. It's just like us having the conversation here and now. Then another thing that happened, just to confirm it even more, to put the cherry on top, probably within roughly a month after we got Brian home to us, we had been presented with a book that a cousin who was a professional librarian found the book, and it's called In Our Neighborhood, Brian Was Adopted. And the book could very well have been written by Windi and myself. The interesting part is that this book had been written 4 years earlier, and it's all about adoption. The boy is from Korea, and that is what the book is all about. So that's just another confirmation that we were on the right track with what God had intended all along.